This is a special Sporting Chance podcast announcement. We have done a t-shirt collaboration with artist Brett Rees of Devils of Dirt Hawking. You have a limited window to buy this shirt. Pre-orders end September 14th. Check it out at devilsofdirthawking.brettrees.com. Take advantage of this collaboration while you can. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Sporting Chance podcast. Be sure to check out sportingchancepod.com for all your flyest new Sporting Chance pod merch. If you're anything like me, you struggled for a while trying to find a source for performance canines. Well, look no further. Check out Clover Creek Canine on Facebook for your performance canine needs. For your East Coast and micro hawking needs, hit up mountainstatefalconrysupply.com. If you want to be cool like me this hunting season and fly a parent-reared goshawk, there's virtually no other source but our boy Seth Roy. Go to northmountaingoshawks.com to put your deposit down on next year's hunting partner. And while you're at it, go ahead and put an order in with the King of Tight, Richard Moats, maker of the tightest braided equipment at midnightfalconry.com. Welcome, everyone, to the Sporting Chance podcast. Today is a very special episode. We are joined today by NAFA Northeast Director Jim Gwazinski, one of our early guests on the show, and also first-time guest John D'Arpino. John is a falconer based out of Connecticut, and as always, got your boy Aaron Kincaid and Casey Everett.
What's up, guys?
Glad to be here.
So, John, introduce yourself. Tell us a little something about you.
Well, I'm a New York transplant. I moved to Connecticut back in the 80s, and I started looking into falconry. And at the time, it wasn't legal. So I just happened to meet Jim through one of the old falconry boards and started asking if I could go out there and kind of hanging around. And Jimmy was doing some hardcore squirrel hawking way back when, before anybody was really doing it to that level. So I had the advantage of not having about 4 or 5 seasons, seeing some really good falconry firsthand. I had a lot of time to consider if I could do falconry, if it would fit into my lifestyle before it was legal. So they passed a law in 1995 legalizing the sport, but we didn't have any regulations in place, so we couldn't practice until 2002. So that's sort of been the story ever since. But I've always been, I grew up in upstate New York, did a little bit of hunting, but the first time I saw falconry, I thought, wow, this is for me. I love the idea of kind of forming a partnership with a bird of prey, and I like the idea of a hunting sport. Nothing goes to waste. You know, everything gets used. Everything either gets eaten by the bird right then or there, or you stick it in your game freezer and it's eaten later on. No waste.
It grabs you. If you do other forms of hunting and then you do falconry, it kind of takes precedence over everything. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's guys I know that want to get into it and also deer hunt seriously. I always warn them, like, you're probably not going to want to do both, and you're not going to be much of a deer hunter if you start falconry.
Yeah. When the young kids, I've been approached by some young kids, and I say, look, make sure your parents are on board. If you do a fall sport, it's going to be really difficult. If you don't have your license, it's really difficult. Not impossible, but just all the considerations. I always, whenever a young kid approached me about getting a sponsor, I'd say, just make sure your parents are on board, because it has a way of taking over some aspects of your life.
Every aspect of your life. Is that what you meant?
Pretty much.
Some say it'll ruin your life, potentially.
It could.
Been known to ruin a couple marriages, that's for sure.
Yeah. But, I think Jim said it when I was first getting started, that the demands are great, but the rewards are great too. And it's like anything else, you get out of it what you put into it. So that's always been a good sort of credo to live by.
Jim, why don't you reintroduce yourself for the new listeners?
Oh, man. Right from the beginning, or just kind of like, yeah. I started flying birds in 95. And as John will attest, I spent a lot of time in woodlots chasing squirrel with the red tails. And at the time, my sponsor was in Cape Cod. So essentially what I would do is, anything that and they don't have Sunday hunting. So I would take the road trip on Saturdays and then hunt with my sponsor and then come back home to Rhode Island and tear up a woodlot and try to apply what I was being taught and, but some tricks of the trade and basically, just trying to figure it out for myself. Rhode Island didn't have any falconers. So, I was doing all the homework, finding the woodlots and the fields to hunt. So I basically would apply what my sponsor would kind of teach me on a Saturday and apply it on a Sunday. The big, what became a challenge was he wasn't a squirrel hawker, and I was pretty fast and furious. I became a pretty hardcore squirrel hawker, and man, the game numbers went up. What I noticed was a huge difference with the red tails, the performance, their, their just how strong they were flying wise. And then, through the years, kind of was a solo act for a while. Then some falconers, I sponsored them, and even to this day, it was a lot of groundwork, getting different regs. When I got into the sport, you were only allowed a passage red tail. And we only had like a 1-page regulation handout. That was it. And there was a few times I testified on my own behalf. Daryl Perkins came down in Rhode Island, testified for me, a few other guys from Massachusetts, but Massachusetts was basically my go-to then. And then, 30 years later, it's been an absolutely wonderful journey. I got to meet you. I got to meet Casey, Phil and Paul, obviously John, Kevin Bousselet, I think were pretty much my first two apprentices. And then certainly probably the first two guys to practice the sport there in Connecticut. John would know more about that as far as numbers go. But man, it's been, red tails and goshawks and, certainly other birds kind of in between. But red tails and goshawks are my sweet spot, and still doing it. And as John said, a lot of sacrifices in between, and then John Gilbert from New Jersey had reached out to me about possibly thinking about the tantalizing idea of maybe being the Northeast director, and I did. I really kind of balked at it. I really had to think about it. It wasn't something I just jumped at like, oh yeah, it sounds great. It was kind of like, well, if I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it right. It's going to take time and a lot of my time. But also, once that happened, Connecticut was immediately on my radar. I immediately was like, I got to help those guys. Rhode Island, we're great. Like we have nothing to really worry about. And as far as the Northeast goes, there's no other state within that Northeast corridor that I represent that, is up against what John and those guys in Connecticut, guys and girls, guys and gals are up against down there in Connecticut. And it's kind of been my focal point. And even just as a falconer in general, I feel for those guys, all the falconers there in Connecticut. They're up against basically no wild take, and it's just kind of god awful,
Yeah.
In addition to some pretty no wild take and some other funky laws.
Yes.
As I understand.
we did actually just get a Sunday hunting bill passed after I don't know how many decades. So that was a big hurdle to overcome. So as of October 1, hunting on private land with landowner permission is legal for all implements, including falconry. So that was a big plus, because not being able to hunt on Sundays, fortunately, Rhode Island has Sunday hunting, and with Jim being my sponsor, I spent a lot of time going out there. New York has it as well, but it gets expensive. An out-of-state license in New York is $110, $120. Casey, I don't know how much it is.
Yeah, well, I'm a resident now, so it's cheaper. But yeah, now I'm buying a Jersey out-of-state tag. So,
and that's what I think is
not cheap. Yeah, exactly, it's not cheap.
Yeah, so I was very lucky because a lot of people, they think I want to be a falconer, and then they get somebody to sign their paperwork, and the next thing you know, they got a bird on their glove, and they don't really know what's involved in it. And I think Aaron, you had alluded to the fact that people have hunted and done deer hunting, but falconry is different. You get a bird and it gets on a kill, and you're all keyed up, and next thing you know, you're reaching in there too fast, and the bird gets spooked, and it takes off, and it just turns into a 3-ring circus. So I had the ability to see a lot of flights, a lot of squirrel chases, a lot of successful hunts of how to trade a bird off, and how to do weight management. So I had the advantage of all that. And I have to self-correct myself here. The law legalizing falconry was passed in 1998. The first year we were able to practice falconry was 2005. So I've been doing it ever since 2005. But it's been a challenge. We were the last of the 49 states that allow falconry to pass falconry regulations, and we're arguably probably have the most challenging regulations, because we still have no wild take, which means we have to go to a different state and trap a bird. We have a species list of the birds we can fly, which would be red-tailed hawk, merlin, the Harris's hawk, and the prairie falcon for some unbeknown reason. And we could also fly, when you get to be a general or a master level, you can fly certain hybrids. But it's a challenge to not be able to trap birds in your own state. There's certainly ample population. Science backs us up, but I think it's some of these old opinions and old habits die hard.
Well, let's go back a little bit. I'd like to talk about these a little more thoroughly. So, me and Casey just spoke to Tyler Rankin, the Southeast Director of NAFA, last night. This episode's going to come out This episode's coming out before that. But Casey made the point that wild take is like at the heart of American falconry.
Yes, it is indeed. It really is.
Jim,
yeah.
Sorry, John. Jim, do you know of any other countries that allow wild take? I mean, it's not common. I'm sure some others do, but
I think Canada does, right, Jim?
Well, yeah, Canada, certainly.
You don't really count. Come on.
Casey's very anti-Canada.
Yeah, it's maple syrup, right? No, I can't comment. Well, I know, parts of Europe. I mean, certainly England, right? They buy all their birds.
Possibly Mexico.
To be obvious is Mongolia. I mean, those guys, they take their.
Yeah, they may not even have legal falconry.
That too, but no, I think the challenge though is, or really, to kind of answer that question is, it's like, I guess it doesn't matter. I mean, as far as America, the United States goes, I look at it as they're the only ones. Connecticut is the outlier. They are the only ones that don't have a wild take. And you alluded to it earlier as well, Aaron, is there's also some weird, like you can't have a hybrid goshawk that has North American, genetic makeup to it. Yeah. So Connecticut is it's just so bizarre where they in an illogic way even came up with what they put down on paper. Point in fact, what John just said earlier was like a prairie falcon. Like, so what are these guys doing? Not only what you're gonna travel, halfway across the United States to try and trap a prairie falcon, and then what's the logic there as an apprentice? And in that the hawk chalk that last one that came out, I spoke to the fact of, the privilege and the not even the aesthetics, but the, being an apprentice and making your way into the sport. It's red tails. I know certain states have a kestrel take. I know Alaska might have a goshawk take, which makes sense because there's not a whole lot of red tails when you get further north. Casey, you'd probably attest that because like Dennis and Tammy of Maine, they probably, in fact, probably see more goshawks than they do red tails at some point. They're so far to the Canadian border there. But my point is that for the most part, 99.9% of falconers, North American falconers, and/or falconers within the United States, your first bird is a red tail. And these, the falconers in Connecticut don't have access to that. And, one of the things that I had said on some of the Zoom meetings that John and I have been involved in and some of the falconers of Connecticut was, I said, listen, it most likely won't happen. But just for argument's sake, the reason you guys should try to pursue it is if just say Rhode Island decided to shut it down, say some biologist comes in and is like, well, wait a minute, you have out of state falconers coming into Rhode Island and they take, I don't want to say offense to it, but they all of a sudden, it raises an eyebrow. All of a sudden they shut down an out of state take because remember, there's states that have reciprocity. So you go into my state, I could trap, you come in, vice versa. There's reciprocity. Connecticut doesn't have it. So if you get a strong-minded state official, falconry coordinator, and it avalanches into biologists that have something against that, now Connecticut, those poor, those falconers, all of a sudden they don't have access to even trap a wild bird in a nearby state, namely Rhode Island, and John can correct me on that, but certainly adjacent states. But the bottom line is, it's like, they don't have access to a wild take. If say another nearby state said, yeah, we don't want, out of state falconers trapping our quote unquote resource, which we both know you could go across the street in Connecticut or in Rhode Island and go into Westerly, Rhode Island, which is the nearby town, and you could trap, bird could fly across the street and you're in Connecticut. Go the other way, you're in Rhode Island. So where that logic lies with certainly Connecticut, but that's, it's crazy that they don't at least allow a wild red tail take.
What is like the biggest thing that's stopping that from changing?
Well, I think it's partly, I don't want to be dismissive of it, but it's sort of like ignorance, but not like, like I'm not making fun of people, but they are just ignorant of how few birds we're actually taking from the wild, and a few years back, probably about 15 years going back now, we approached some of the groups and said, hey, we want to do this. And here's the numbers. We had the finding of no significant impact from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which said in no uncertain terms, there's no negative impact in wild raptor populations. So some of the birding groups feel it's more of an emotional issue. In fact, I had one of the top birders say, you guys could take 100 red tails and it wouldn't make any difference because we're taking so few. Let's put it this way. More birds probably get killed, more red tails probably get killed in 1 week on the highways than we would take in probably 2 or 3 seasons. We have about 20 licensed falconers on any given year. There's probably about 6 or 7 of us that are active. So, and as you guys know, these are passage birds. The very nature of their existence is they move. These birds that are in Rhode Island tomorrow could have been in Connecticut today. Connecticut's birds aren't really Connecticut birds. Yeah, there are some resident populations, but they, by their very nature, they'll move. They'll migrate. So the whole idea of catching a bird on passage is you're catching birds from Canada, New York, Maine, Vermont. Who knows where they're coming from? That's the idea behind banding a bird when you release it. You maybe add a little bit to the science. But to answer your question, it's really an emotional issue for a lot of people. They don't like the idea. Some people find hunting distasteful and they find falconry distasteful. And there's not much you can do about that. But generally, if people that are at least open-minded, when they learn about falconry, it's a pretty environmentally way of hunting because there's no waste. There's no trophy hunting, and you're really working for the bird. Who was the guy, Jimmy? Who was the guy that called it? I think it was Kent Carney called it advanced bird watching or a high.
That was Tom Cade.
Tom Cade. Yeah. So there you go. I mean, it's really just this kind of these old opinions. They just die hard, but it starts with a conversation. That's why I'm really glad to be able to have the opportunity to talk about it and perhaps reach a little bit wider audience, because a lot of people aren't even aware that we didn't have Sunday hunting and we don't have the wild.
So when you say it's an emotional issue, is this with the government officials it's an emotional issue, or other not like third party groups like Audubon Society and stuff like that?
Yeah. Again, I don't want to single any particular group out because there's individuals within those groups that are open-minded, but it's less the government officials. We've had some support from the DEEP because that all of our regulation changes have to go through them, and without their support, it's impossible. But I would say it's more some of the birding groups and some people that just don't. It's not a hunting-friendly state. I would say most of the states in the Northeast aren't hunting-friendly, with the exception of possibly Maine and some areas in New York State. So you're dealing with people that don't like hunting, people that don't like the idea of a bird being in captivity, even if it's obviously nobody can get inside the head of a bird, but I like to explain it like, hey, the bird is trading some free will for a pretty cushy life. They get protection from the elements, protection from being electrocuted, poisoned by rat poison, shot, hit by cars. We bring them to the vet. We give them a really good nutritious diet. We imp their feathers if they break them. We have the ability to bring the bird inside and perch it in a warm, if it's below zero. I mean, that they're pretty well equipped to survive in the wild, but we have the ability to do all those things. And the idea is that you're leaving this bird in better shape than when you got it, because it has a safety net. That's the way Jim used to explain it to me, is it has a safety net. It can hone its skills. You're helping this bird learn to be a better hunter. When you release it, it's got a leg up on survival.
I always tell the uninitiated that any first-year bird you trap, the odds are stacked against it that it will survive that first year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The rates are 75 to even 90% mortality rate for first-year birds, as we all know.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason we've always been able to have a wild take, because the biologists see the bird as most likely dying, and a falconer taking it is kind of a net positive, because we can get it through that juvenile stage, teach it the skills it needs to hunt, and then release it back into the wild as a healthy breeding adult.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, once you get through that first difficult winter, the survival rates go up dramatically. And in the hands of a falconer, you're like, okay, they're really honing their skills, and they don't, in the wild, let's face it, a bird doesn't kill, and it's a young bird. And in the beginning, they're not all great at hunting. They miss a few kills, and you get a few nights below zero. That line between survival and death gets really, really thin.
Yeah. I think, something that kind of occurred to me on a couple Zoom meetings back on, you get, Connecticut guys and even NAFA is, it's funny because, you guys too, you guys talk to a lot of falconers across the nation, or, all over. And the one thing that I found that's kind of not frustrating on our side, but it seems that we as falconers, we're always trying to justify what we're doing. And, it's like every once in a while, I think we all got to take a step back and realize that staying federally, we're allowed to do what we're doing. And I always feel like we're always in the corner trying to punch our way out. And, for everything that John just said, and even Aaron, you commented on, those, even though they're not obvious reasons for what we do and what we provide for the birds of prey that we employ in the sport, bottom line is it's like there comes a point you almost want to say that, some of those sanctions out there, like, hey, wait, why am I defending myself in something that it's federally and state, certainly it's regulated, and it's the most highly regulated hunting sport in the nation. So it's like, I'm allowed to do this. So what's the problem here in the sense of, when you talk about, bird of prey populations and the nuances of why we justify that we're really not doing any harm to these populations. I mean, in the end, it gets to the point, maybe it's just because after 30 years of it and certainly fighting the fight of falconry at times, which I don't have to do here in Rhode Island, but I find that we're always on our heels, like, whoa, but really in the end, I think I don't know, maybe there comes a point where, you're like, hey, enough's enough. Like the rigors that we go through to be able to have the privilege to fly these birds, and it is a privilege. But man, I mean, you go across the world and the world over, I mean, because of our highly restrictive regulations and what we have to do an apprenticeship, and we get to trap wild birds, minus Connecticut, it's like we have a lot to offer. And then when you think of like the P Fund, I mean, Tom Cade, the farm or the barn, they call it down at Cornell, we were a huge part of getting the peregrine falcon off the endangered species list. So it's like when you're having these conversations with birders that aren't quite, they're looking at it in a very superficial, very biased way. You almost want to, and I said it in the thing that I had done for PBS, is I do consider ourselves conservationists as well. Because when you think about it, there's no one, as far as birds of prey go, who's more invested than a falconer? I mean, I get the rehab part of it, but they're on the other end of it where they're trying to get a bird that's injured back to the wild. We're taking birds and hunting with them and enjoying the hunt with them. And basically we get to release our birds back. It's like,
yeah, you're right. I think you're right about that. I feel like we are on our heels quite often, trying to explain away what we do. But a better answer might be, if somebody's questioning why we do it, is because it's legal and I have a license to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we as falconers, we're I don't want to say that's just not guilty, but we kind of forget that we do have a valid reason to do what we're allowed to do. And then sometimes, I guess, for lack of a way of saying it any different, is then sometimes you just got to grow a bigger pair of balls and just say, hey, I don't care if you're against it. Bottom line is I can do it because it's legal.
Well,
and it's
internationally,
right?
It's an intangible, cultural heritage or human heritage.
UNESCO. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's when you guys were saying it's a right. It's, it's a privilege. I'm like thinking to myself, it's a human heritage activity. Like, we've been doing this before you had these regular, kiss my ass. You know what I mean? Like, we've been doing this forever. Like, it has no impact on wild populations. We're invested in birds of prey, all the things that you guys said. And I'd be damned if I'm going to take a second seat to some bird watcher that's going to go harass some breeding bird and set up, tents and all this shit that they do around, breeding nests just so they can get some pictures and, some clout from their friends. Right. It's like, dude, you're mad at us for, you think we're exploiting? Like, you're exploiting too. You know what I mean? Like, you ever been there? You ever heard of any of these nests or these peregrine eyries? They're literally they have to put caution tape with volunteer cops to guard it from people going too close and harassing to get their perfect shot. It's like, come on. You know what I mean?
You hear about birders throwing, your owl just flew up. Casey has an owl flying around in his room.
John, you could speak to it because your memory might be better. But I remember when we testified down there, right? The State House.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny. But you remember Robert Kennedy? I mean, what was so eloquent about him as an orator was, he basically, I remember there was a desk out in front of us and they were all kind of above us looking down. And when we were testifying, but the bottom line is, I remember Robert basically said, you should all be ashamed of yourselves. The people behind me are more invested in the preservation of these raptors than basically even the state was. Well, and I think he said at that point, it was probably 30, 40 years ago, meaning there was bounties on these birds of prey. And he basically was like, you should all be ashamed. Falconers were invested in bringing awareness to Hawk Mountain when they'd go up to the top of them. Yeah. I've seen black and white pictures of them where there's basically birds of prey, everything from Sharpies to eagles that they're stacked like cordwood. They're shot up on top of Hawk Mountain, and that's it's like all of a sudden we become the bad guys. That's I think the part that's insulting, especially coming out of something like the P Fund, which they had a lot to do with, again, bringing those peregrines back.
I don't think the Anatom peregrine east of the Mississippi's. I really don't think it would exist if it were not for the efforts of falconers. And I think when some people, they're going to be dismissive of the scientific evidence, but a lot of people they're just not aware of it. And I think there's a sense among some people, just not all, but I don't want to paint everybody the same broad brush, but some people in the community, they think, well, we know what's best for the birds. And we don't purport to be experts. I'm not a raptor expert, but inevitably, when you're going to spend time around these birds and you're going to be out taking them from the wild in a humane trapping way, or be it climbing a nest for a goshawk or trapping a red-tailed, you're going to inevitably learn something about their natural history. I don't think you can be a successful falconer if you're lazy or if you don't have an interest in the natural history and the welfare of these birds. You just won't be successful, because it's just integral to being a good falconer, in my opinion. And I'm glad that you touched on it, Aaron. You said, there is a conservation element. It's a strong conservation element to it, because of the fact that a lot of these birds are returned to the wild. We're doing it the way they used to do it. You take a bird, you man it, you train it, you hunt with it, and then you whistle it down the wind after you're done with it. It's a great feeling to hunt with a bird and watch it progress and help it. People always say, well, do you teach the bird how to hunt? No, the bird knows how to hunt. I just provide the opportunities, and does the bird bring stuff back? No, I don't. But I think a lot of people, let's face it, if you want to go hunting, you take your hunter safety course and you buy your permits and you get your hunting license. If you want to go fishing, you pay your $20 and you get your fishing license. I tell people what's involved in becoming a falconer, a lot of them, like, their eyes glaze over. Thinking, I don't want to do that. I mean, you got to get a sponsor. You got to have your housing, all your equipment inspected. You got to take a 150 question test, score 80% or better. And it's not rocket science, but you do have to study. You do have to know this stuff.
Let me ask you a question, John. Are you allowed to shoot bobwhite quail in Connecticut?
I believe we are. There's really not a native we don't really have native populations of quail. So a lot of it's put in, it's in terms of pheasant, a lot of it's take. There are, every once in a while, you'll get some quail that perhaps were escaped.
My point being is, in North Carolina, you could legally, there's bobwhite season, you can shoot bobwhite quail. I almost guarantee that there are more red-tailed hawks in every single state than there are bobwhite quail.
Yeah. I think that's a safe bet.
Oh, yeah. Certainly Rhode Island. I don't even know. We don't have a prolific population of bobwhite for sure.
Even some exhibitor species. When I first moved to Connecticut, it was pretty rare to see a Cooper's hawk anywhere near a town. They're just all over the place. Sharpies are starting to make a comeback. Merlins and kestrels are making a comeback. We have it's not a falconry bird, but it was unusual to see a bald eagle in Connecticut unless it was during the winter. Now I live right close to the Connecticut River, so I see them all the time driving to work. Mm-hmm. We have a thriving native raptor population in the state.
And you cannot trap Cooper's hawks either?
We cannot. We can. Well, we can. We can't trap anything for falconry that's on the list of endangered, threatened, or special concern. Now, for endangered or threatened, there's some scientific criteria. Special concern, that's almost. Anyway,
so red tails are on that list?
Red tails are not. We just can't trap birds from the wild. We're allowed to fly birds obtained legally in a different state, which includes the Cooper's hawk, because it's not on one of the lists.
But you could not trap a Cooper's hawk in Connecticut.
You can't trap anything in Connecticut. No.
Okay.
So how many attempts were made to try to get that changed, or is this just something that's like demoralizing for the club? And you said earlier there's only roughly 20 people at any given time that are really active? So is it just like a numbers thing that there's not enough push for it, or what do you think it is?
I think, there's a certain degree of burnout after a while. I think once we got falcon regulations, we thought, well, they're not regulations, but we'll do it, and we'll just go to other birds and trap. But like Jim brought up a really salient point, which is reciprocity. All someone has to do is look at the regulations and say, hey, wait a minute here. We're supposed to be able to go into Connecticut and trap a bird. Well, obviously they can't because we can't. So there is no reciprocity here. But to answer your question, we've attempted it probably 2 or 3 times over the 20 some years that we've had falconry. I think it's probably something that we're going to need to do every year, because the people that were responsible for getting Sunday hunting legalized in the state, that's what they did. They just kept coming back. They didn't quit. And that's really what it takes to get any kind of meaningful changes to legislation. You guys know it's not easy. I think New Jersey, you had to fight the battle. New York, the same thing. Jim certainly did in Rhode Island. It's not easy anywhere. I think there's a kind of a systemic misunderstanding about what falconry is and what falconry isn't. Even in hunting friendly states, I'm sure you get that down in your state as well, Aaron. People just don't really understand it.
Oh, they just don't care down here.
That's the other thing too. Is a lot of the legislative officials are loath to pass legislation that's going to impact maybe 20 people. So
I think falconry was legalized here in 84, maybe 1984. So it's been, in the grand scheme of things, as far as America is concerned, has been legal quite a while.
Yeah.
But like Rhode Island, we have basically every single thing we could want down here. We had Sunday hunting as falconers before gun hunters had it.
That's awesome.
Which is great. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always curious to me because I'm in the Bible Belt where you're supposed to just devote the day to the Lord on Sunday.
Yeah,
you're not supposed
That's right.
Sunday rest, right?
Yeah.
You know what? You can do both. I go to church every Sunday, but I can find time to
Sunday. Casey on Sundays, he drinks strychnine, he dances with snakes. He has does this weird thing where Casey chains himself. Casey's family gathers around him and he
Yeah.
Something to be said here again is, kind of, look at it from a different perspective is, so it's also who your state officials are. Because what was it, 2002 when we had to revamp everything? You remember they're like, the feds turned it back.
It was 2010, I think.
All right. Yeah. So I worked with a great guy, Paul Ricard. He was the one, like, basically it was gift wrapped. And right at the end, as we're finalizing everything, I said, hey, what do you think of a peregrine take? And there was only a few states that had a peregrine take at the time. And he said to me, you do that, it's going to put a stop sign on all of this. It's going to put a big cog in the wheel. So I said, okay, not a problem. He said, return to it, but certainly go for it. But if you do that right now, you're going to hold everything up. So I passed on the regs that we have at the time, which were phenomenal. And then we're 4 years ago. So basically we got a peregrine take 4 years ago. But I guess what I'm saying is the officials changed because there was a few DEM. That's our Department of Environmental Management that's the acronym for our guys here. There were a few against a peregrine take. And then fast forward, it was basically like, hey, what do you think? I put some feelers out there and everything that came back to me was very positive and accepting. And I just sat down and I wrote the letters and I did the research and put, some scientific, fun facts to it. And it really was our state officials that were like, yeah, like, of course, yeah, it's logical. So I think a big part of it is that facet of it. And that's where I think John in the state of Connecticut, where they're up against is just basically not only, I think the emotional part of it is more of those those entities like Audubon and whatnot and bird banders. But really, in the end, it's those biologists and the ones that can really kind of grease the wheel for these guys. There's still a standstill there. So that's, I think, what I'm trying to get at here is, at least with Rhode Island, to kind of wait your time, and then boom. I mean, the peregrine take went through it was like a greased wheel. They're like, yeah, let's do it, and that's not what certainly though you guys are getting, John's getting, and those guys down there in Connecticut. But I think right, John, in some of those Zoom meetings, you did say that.
I mean,
the landscape's changed though. Like some of those 15 years ago is different than now. So
I think most of the opposition we got were from some of the top birders. We've never really had an oppositional or an antagonistic relationship with our DEEP. I would say that they're supportive. I wouldn't say they're falling all over themselves to help us, because let's face it, they have bigger issues. They're short-staffed. They're dealing with budget cuts. They're dealing with all kinds of crazy people doing all kinds of crazy things on the waterways and in the woods. So I feel for them, but it's not the same level of collaboration that you would have in New York or Rhode Island. I'm not sure about New Jersey, Casey.
New Jersey's good. Pretty much anything we've wanted over the years, we pushed and got it. Like, I think maybe 10, 12 years ago, or it could have been 15 years ago, we pushed for Canada geese, excuse me. People get triggered when you say Canadian. Canada geese and turkeys are now game species for falconry, which we can take. I guess it was just an incident where if it happens, you want to be able to keep it or whatever if you're within season. So they've been pretty receptive to it. New York, my experience with New York has not been good. They're very slow to respond, very slow to do anything. We can't have passage peregrines, even if it's transferred in from another state. It's completely illegal, which is crazy because there's so much land here and there's so much places you can fly long wings. On the East Coast, especially, there's some really good locations, but you can't even have one. You can't even possess it. So that's another huge problem. But it's all the red tape and bureaucracy, and it's, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how to navigate that stuff. You know what I mean? And it sounds like down in Connecticut, you guys are very limited on your resources to push for this stuff. That's why we're really hoping maybe NAFA, and I'm sure Jim's already aware of it, or just making light of it, like just exposing it, that we'd like to get NAFA involved to try to put, and really help get this done so that it's a feather in our cap, pun intended, for everybody. Because it's a huge disservice to you guys. It's like an abomination. It's a disgrace. We gotta change this. And I don't know what's involved to do it, but we're going to open up the conversation and get the ball rolling for the third time over the last, 20 years, 30 years. Maybe.
And I think that's where it starts. Yeah.
To summarize, and I'm sorry to beat a dead horse, it's just so hard to wrap my mind around it. If a new falconer started in Connecticut, okay, we all know falconers should probably start with a red-tailed hawk, correct? We're probably all agreeing with that. Absolutely. They want a red-tailed hawk. They're going to have to pull a trapping permit in a neighboring state. Correct. Go to that state, trap the red-tailed hawk.
Buy a hunting license.
All of that. And I don't even know how much it costs. It could be hundreds of dollars. It depends on the state, right?
I think Rhode Island is probably the least expensive at around 45 non-resident.
Yeah, we're good.
New York is upwards of 100. New Jersey, last I checked, was around 90. And there's some states that don't allow a non-resident take. I don't think Massachusetts does, unless they've recently changed that.
Well, hold on. Let me interject real quick. The thing about it is, for me to want to hunt in Connecticut, what is it, 225, John? What's
for a non-resident? I'm not sure, but they
falconry and then the hunting license.
Yeah, they had a non-resident. They required a non-resident falconry permit, and I said, "This is crazy. That's the equivalent of like requiring somebody to get a Connecticut driver's license to pass through the state with their car. It's really absurd." And I said, "How many people have availed themselves of this non-resident falconry license?" They said 0. I said, you think we can just do away with this now? And I think that's one of the things that they are going to acquiesce on, because it doesn't make any sense.
But
Yeah, I think it's
Maine does that though, don't they? Because when you get your out-of-state take from Maine, you actually become a Maine falconer at the same time.
Yeah, but I think, as you know, Casey, I think it's $72 for 3 years. They are like, I think it's like, because I've looked into it just to hunt. But in order just to hunt in Connecticut, you have to be a falconer, just like Maine, right? Where you have to pull a bird or whatever. But you have to get the license and the hunting. I think the hunting is a lot. I think altogether you're looking at, this is the number in my head, is like $325.
Oh my gosh!
Yes.
That's disgusting.
It's astronaut. It's again just illogical. Like, well, wait, and I don't mind. Like, hey, yeah, sure, I'll do like with Maine. I'll buy my falconry license, but I mean, make it like feasible. And then even the hunting license, fine. Rhode Island, I think the capture permit is $25.
Right, and then
John can come in,
yeah,
get his with the hunting license is like 40
and 45. So for less than $100, you can do that, and everybody's certainly willing to do that. But I think our permits alone are 110 for 3 years, and I don't want to really throw anybody under the bus, but our permits, we got new permits. We don't actually have permit cards anymore because the machine to print the permits has been broken for 2 years. Every time I go to a meeting, I said, hey, how about those permits? We paid $110 and we don't have any physical proof that our falconry permits are up to date. I said, can't you just put something on DEP letterhead? So if we get stopped by a conservation officer, we could say, yep, we're legitimate here. Here's a letter that specifies I don't have a physical permit, but my permit is up to date. So there's a lot of, I guess you could call it apathy. It's just falconry. It's small fry. It's not on any radar screen.
Bless you, Aaron.
Thank you. So once the apprentice goes out of state, pays all that, gets a red tail, they can do their falconry in Connecticut every day except Sunday, right?
Well, and now you'll be able to do it.
Now you have it. Okay. So then once you're a general or master and you want access to different types of birds, what are you limited to in Connecticut?
You can fly anything that's not on the state. You can't fly a goshawk hybrid. You can
North American goshawk.
Right, North American. Yeah, let's be specific.
You cannot have a North American goshawk in Connecticut, even if it's captive born, even if you trapped it in another state. You cannot own it.
As of right now, yes, because it's on our list of endangered, threatened, or special concern. Now, that special concern there's not a whole lot of science that goes behind what goes on the list of special concern. I mean, tomorrow they could say, hey, we are concerned about the number of red tails. We're going to put that on the special concerns. And then that's it.
Who cares if it's captive born and it's from another state that doesn't have a problem with it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
that bird was never going to be in the wild if it was captive born.
My logic is we bring a goshawk in from a state where it's legal to catch it, just say Maine, and the bird escapes. Well, we just added to the native population by one bird. But some of the logic is, well, no, there's a special genetic stream of Connecticut goshawks, and we don't want to pollute the gene pool. I'm thinking, okay, this is absurd, but this is the kind of sort of misinformation that the level that we're dealing with, and not from the state officials. It's more from the public.
Yeah, but they have
here. I'm sorry, Jim. The rehabs here have gotten goshawks in who have migrated, who've been on their way for whatever reason, went off course, found their way in North Carolina, hit a window, or, so ridiculous to think that Maine goshawks have never ended up in Connecticut. Jersey goshawks have never ended up in Connecticut and joined the breeding population. What a crazy thing. So if you wanted a peregrine falcon, you cannot have a captive born peregrine falcon.
No, I'm not even sure. I've got to double check my regs. I should know this, but I don't even think we can have a peregrine hybrid. I think there's one guy who was doing sort of a a bird abatement thing because he had a berry farm and he was using a Jeer Shaker. But I'm pretty sure peregrine hybrids are off the list as well. But anything, so what we're trying to achieve here is just say, hey, let us fly anything that, first of all, let us have a wild take on red tails. I know, I think, again, most people should, one of the things that Jimmy taught me a long time ago was you should just match the bird to your terrain and the type of prey. So red tails are really ideal. Especially for a beginning falconer, because the weight management on it's pretty easy. If you screw up by an ounce or two, what that's going to happen is the bird's going to sit up in the tree and act like it doesn't know you, or it's going to be a little weak. But you're not really going to do much harm to the bird. Whereas a kestrel, let's face it, we feed bigger pieces of meat to a kestrel than a kestrel weighs to our red tail. So it's not always a great first bird for an apprentice. I think in Maine they like to do it because of what Jim had alluded to. There's not a lot of red tails up there. There's not a lot of game, so they like to get people into the long wing sort of mentality. Even though a kestrel is more like let's face it, it's more like a parakeet than a long wing in some ways. But that being said, yeah, it's really.
You can't own a kestrel either.
No, we cannot. Which is a shame.
No,
yes.
No,
but a Merlin, it's funny because a Merlin's really not much bigger than a kestrel, especially a Jack Merlin and a female kestrel. They're pretty close. Yeah. And actually, for the fields we have around here, early successful fields, and kestrels would actually be a better bird to fly for most falconers than Merlins. Merlins do pretty well. I think further south and up north, perhaps where you have some. But there's plenty of Cooper's hawks. Sharpshids are making a comeback. They're still a little dicey. I flew a Harris's hawk here, a captive red bird, and it was fine. You just have to be a little bit more cognizant of temperature changes with a Harris's hawk. But red tails, they're great birds, and they're not just for apprentices. You can. I think people are just scratching the surface on what you can do with a red tail. I think no one's ever really said, "Hey, I'm gonna really push the limits on this thing, see what I can take." Some people have consistently taken waterfowl with red tails. So,
there's people out there that are certainly pushing the end for red tail.
We had a guest on the show from Florida, and he hunts sugarcane fields and rice fields, and his predominant quarry is waterfowl with a red tail.
It's awesome.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, and I think Jim taught me a long time ago that, I think because when I first started hanging around with Jim and learning about falconry, there was not a lot of squirrel hawkers. And I think Jim can speak to this. Way back when he first started getting into falconry, it was almost considered to be bad form to fly your bird. It was like, your bird can get hurt, it can get bit. I think they didn't even give game pens for squirrel.
No. Well, it was called quote unquote taboo, and because you bumped into Gary Brewer, you remember at the NAFA meeting.
Yeah. I happened to go to because when I actually became a NAFA member before I was a falconer, so I was the Hawk Chalk editor, so I went to the one NAFA meet, and it was in Amarillo, and I happened to meet Gary Brewer, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing? You want to go out trapping?" I thought, yeah, this is like taking batting practice with Mickey Mantle way back when. So it was great, and he was sort of like the godfather of squirrel hawking. And I told him that I knew Jim, and he said, "Well, you know what? You tell Jim he's really important to the sport," because Jim was sort of like the Gary Brewer of the Northeast. There was not a lot of people doing squirrel hawking, and I thought this is great because we have a lot more squirrels, at least in Connecticut, than we do rabbits. The habitat here is fragmented, like a lot of northeastern states, and then you have bobcats and coyotes and fox, and there's a lot of people, a lot of creatures that are kind of competing for the same rabbit population.
Yeah, you never hear about squirrel populations being in decline.
No.
That's right.
And I love the chases because they're so visual. Like Jim said, the way he described it is sometimes a rabbit hunt it's sort of like a drag race. That's why goshawks are so impressive because they can close that gap so quickly. But squirrel hawking, you never know how it's going to go. Squirrels I have a lot more respect for squirrels as a quarry after I started hunting it because they and how many times have we seen them bail out from a tree 60 feet high, hit the ground, and just run away? They know every hole and every tree. When they're running, they're not just running randomly; they're running to a specific place. They're wicked.
I've taken gun hunters out squirrel hawking, and they go, "Wow, I've never seen squirrels act like that."
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it. The first time I saw Jim's bird catch a squirrel, I thought, "Wow, this is it's one of those things. Either you love it or you think, oh, okay, this is cool, but it's not for me." I think I was hooked from the minute I saw it.
Yeah, squirrel hawk. I'm a big fan of squirrel hawking. It's a necessity for East Coast falconers for the most part. Mm-hmm. You got to supplement, even if you predominantly go after rabbits. I think you got to supplement with some squirrels here and there.
Yeah.
So the focus right now for you guys in Connecticut is getting access to Connecticut red-tailed hawks, huh?
That's one of the focuses. The other focus is to say, let us fly, and this is sort of an ancillary thing. The main focus really is let us take birds from the wild. The science is behind us. The biology is behind us. There's really no scientific reason that would disallow a limited wild take. And we're talking not many being taken out of the wild at all.
Mm-hmm. So, to your point earlier, more are getting electrocuted every day.
Yeah.
More are dying to rodenticides every day.
Yeah.
More are being hit by cars every day. More are being killed by great horned owls at night every day. So the falconry take and that's part of, I think, the reason why we're allowed to do it is because it's minimal, even nationally. What did we say, Casey, last night? How many falconers are in America, approximately?
I think roughly 4,500 to 5,000, something like that, max.
That's nothing.
It's nothing.
And then on top of it all, John, how many falconers in Connecticut are going to trap red tails annually?
In any given season, maybe 6, 7.
Yeah,
it's a blip on the radar screen. It's insignificant.
There's no basis for it. No basis.
And I don't mean to be dismissive. I get some of the reticence behind some people, but I think once they learn about what falconry is and what we're doing and how dedicated we are to these birds, if any open-minded, reasonable person would probably say, "Hey, that's okay. What you're doing is okay." In fact, not only is it okay, it's probably helping the bird in the long run.
We form these special bonds with our birds. The birds love us, right?
It's funny because I've been interviewed a few times, on the radio and in print, and they love to talk about this mystical bond. I'm thinking, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it's just not quite as poetic as that. It's more like we're a walking refrigerator. And
well, no, I really no. Think about it. In the end, it's a hunting bond. They've recorded wild goshawks following badger around out west, so it's like. We're like the badger.
That's why they like Casey, because they remind him. He reminds them of a badger.
Well, he does have that sort of badger-like quality about it. He's
Wolverine, short and round.
Stocky.
Yeah, stocky.
You might want to have your DNA tested there.
See, this is again where I think that's the part that I'm growing more frustrated with is, you know what? So what? So you don't like what I do. That doesn't give you the right to get in the way of it as well. In other words, that'd be like a falconer turning the tide on a bander. Like, hey, you know what? I don't like the fact that you're just banding these birds. Like,
you're stressing those birds out for no reason.
Yeah.
Right. That's what, so it's like, again, I get why we're a target to a degree, but then it gets to a point where, I don't know, man, maybe you guys should make a t-shirt like, don't hate the falconer. It's like, we're not doing anything on the sly. We're not doing anything illegal. Back in the day, it was a $100 federal permit when you had to fill out your 186A form, which was, you sent the blue form to the state, whatever. What I'm getting at is you went through the rigors of being legal and flying these birds and hunting with them. We're not doing anything that we are not allowed to do. And it's, that kind of nuance where we feel like criminals because, certain entities try to treat us that way. It's like, well, you don't have any more right to ban birds than I have to hunt my birds. So why don't we just call it a draw? You go to your corner, I go to mine, but just don't get in the way when, Connecticut's coming around and they want to at least be able to trap a red tail. Don't get in the way of it. Don't dress like a bird, which I think was what happened, right, John? Like there were people dressing as birds.
It was a little bit before my time, but yeah, you're talking about an activity that's literally been around since before the days of Christ, and it's really relatively unchanged. There's a few bells and whistles now. We have electronic scales and GPS tracking, but it's essentially a bird, a man or a woman, and a dog, sometimes a horse. But that's really what it's all about. And you're talking about an activity that's practiced in successfully in 49 states in the Union and dozens of countries around the world with a rich and storied history. I can't think of many things that have been around this long and have been relatively unchanged for this amount of time.
And the thing is, let's all face it, it's hard. It's not easy. To be successful at falconry is not easy. It's not a gimme. Yeah. It's not a layup.
I mean, if you wanted to kill a bunch of squirrels as fast as possible, I'm a terrible shot. I could go out and shoot my limit with a 22 in the woods at no time. Yeah, I think that's why a lot of falconers are also fly fishermen, because there's an art to it. They're drawn. We do it because it's hard. I like to ride bicycles. Yeah, I could get up that hill a lot faster on a motorcycle, but I'm riding up the hill because I like to push myself. And I think that's what drew me to falconry. Is like, it's not rocket science, but it is hard, and it's as Jim said, and I'll repeat myself here, the demands are great, but the rewards are even greater. It's satisfying when everything finally comes together, because it's like in the first couple of years, I was like, wow, this really works. You can actually pull a bird that's flying over your head, almost out of sight, down out of the sky, like you're fishing from the sky. And then it's like, okay, first you got to get used to it on the glove. And then but the first time it takes that, leans over and eats off the glove, it's like, aha, this works. And it really is the same techniques that have been used for millennia. It's amazing. It works.
So going back to the plan in Connecticut, you're pursuing trapping non-protected, well, all bird. That's something that let me talk about that for a second. We all know this here. Most listeners know this. Probably all listeners know this, but when your grandma picks up a cardinal feather off the ground and puts it on her fridge, she's breaking the law.
Illegal.
Yes.
Illegal. Lock her up.
Yep.
Right? Because cardinals are protected.
Yep.
Right.
Cardinals are a protected species. And they have the same level of protection that a red-tailed hawk has. Red-tailed hawks are not an endangered species. They're not a threatened species. They are protected just like songbirds are.
Yes. Under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which means no bird or no part of a bird can be taken.
Right. So the exceptions in your state would be goshawks. If you guys are able to have, of course you guys would love to be able to trap goshawks, I'm sure, but you're not pursuing that, I'm assuming, right?
No.
Right.
I think as far as goes, we would really just pursue a passage red tails.
And not Cooper's hawks.
I think if I don't think there's that many people that would want to try an exhibitor. I certainly would try for it. I would like to be able to fly whatever we're legally allowed here. Yeah. But I would also, at the same time, like to get rid of this list and say, if we are trapping from another state, so there's sort of two issues here. The main one is, let us take red tails from the state. Then we don't have to go to another state. The other states don't have to worry about us taking some of the resource, even though that red tail in Rhode Island was probably in Connecticut yesterday. But that's a moot point. The main thing is we want to be able to trap birds in our state like they do in 48 other states in the Union. And nobody's running out of red tail. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that with conviction. I don't think any states are facing a shortage of red tails. So that's the main thing.
Yeah,
I would recommend that you push for everything up front.
I think that's probably a good idea because, if you're going to go to the trouble, because it requires a statute change and then a regulation change. And they're both, the statute change, it can be lengthy. You got to get a bill sponsor. You got to get it through the Environment Committee. You have to get it through the House, the Senate. This is the Connecticut General Assembly I'm talking about on the state level. Then you have to get it through regulations review. It usually has to go through OPM. So there's a lot of steps. And if you miss any of those deadlines, you got to start the whole process over in the next legislative session. And then every other year, they don't really, all they talk about are budget bills. So odd years, they talk about this, and even years, they talk about that. In the sessions, in Connecticut, our legislators, they are not full-time legislators, which means they all work jobs, unless they're independently wealthy. And some don't, but a lot of them are working other jobs. They're not full-time legislation like there is in New York. So that means the sessions tend to be a little bit shorter, which means you really got to hit the ground running. It's there is a lobbyist that does some work for the sportsmen and sportswomen's groups, but for the most part, they're going to go where the money is. They're going to do gun stuff. They're going to do stuff like that, and that's understandable. But we have had some support from lobbyists. But the fact is, the onus is on us. If we really want this, we need to step up. NAFA has been supportive. Jim is certainly, it's great. This is like a dream come true. We have a really great window of opportunity here with Jim being the Northeast director, because he understands the unique challenges that Connecticut falconers have faced better than most people in Connecticut. So, but we have to take action. We need to break through that inertia. And then NAFA will help. Other falconers from other states will help. But a lot of this is on us.
So,
I agree
what are
with
the
Casey.
what are the first steps? I'm sorry, Aaron, but like, what are the first steps to take? Like,
well, we've already crafted some legislation. We had a meeting. We said, hey, this is what we want to change in terms of the language goes. And so now the next step would be to get somebody in the Connecticut General Assembly to sponsor the bill, preferably somebody who's on the Environment Committee, preferably a ranking member. And then they're going to introduce the bill, and then the hard part comes. We need to lobby. We need to be vocal. We need to dispel some of this misinformation about what happens to red-tailed hawks when they get into the hands of a falconer. That's when the real work begins, and it can be a tireless effort. But if it's important, I'm 65, so I'll be doing this as long as I can. But I'd also like to do this for the people that would come after me, the younger generations, because I think it's important. I think none of us wants the sport to die out after we're gone.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea of people doing this, my son's children and his, my grandchildren's children. So, but that's the next step, is to get somebody to sponsor a bill, get it into the Connecticut General Assembly, and then just push.
okay.
I think it would be very reasonable for you guys to request the ability to trap all non-species of special concern endangered species in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, that's I think it's a good point. We went back because the first time we introduced two bills at the same time. One was a limited take, just red-tailed hawks, passage birds, and one was Sunday hunting just for falconry. Well, the wild take got shot down almost immediately, but the Sunday hunting for falconry got out of committee and made it through the House and died in the Senate, because there's a lot of bills. And unless you have a full-time lobbyist, unless you're over there, excuse my language, but unless you're over there at the State House with your foot up somebody's ass, it's really hard to get these things pushed through. So that's really important. That's going to take some coordination. It's going to take phone calls. It's going to take education. It's going to take some serious lobbying.
How can our listeners help in this? Like, calling, emailing. Maybe we do a petition or like how they always send this thing around, sign this petition and get things changed or whatever. Is there something like that we could do to help push it?
I don't know. I don't know. I think petitions, in my experience, is petitions, they sort of make you feel good, but I don't know how much credence that people put into them. I don't think it would hurt. I think awareness is the main thing. So having this opportunity to come on this podcast and reach an audience that's far greater than I would be ever able to reach in probably my lifetime, talking to people just casually that happen to pop in the woods. This is a golden opportunity. So creating the awareness that this is something that a lot of states are doing. We're not criminals. We hold down jobs. We have families. We have children. We have dogs. We have cats. We have goldfish. We're normal people. So that's the main thing. And we're not only that, but we're conservationists. We're really concerned about these birds. So awareness. To answer your question, I think if people can talk to, especially if they live in Connecticut, if I'm reaching anybody in the Connecticut, it's really important to let people know that what we're doing it's really environmentally conscious.
I understand that, but what does it look like in like physical practice? What does it look like? Like making posts on Facebook? Because there's never been more falconry content on social media than there is now. But it seems like we need to like laser focus it, like on Connecticut. How this is a huge problem. This has been a problem for years. We're just trying to educate people. Sign the petition, make a phone call. And I do think that I don't know that petitions, like you said, make a difference. But I heard somebody in government said, forgot what I was listening to as a podcast or something. The government considers a phone call like 50 people. If somebody is wound up enough to call, it's 50 people.
Yes.
If an email is received, the email counts as like 25 people. That's the way that the government looks at it. So if somebody's annoyed enough to call, there's 50 other people that are just as annoyed. And that counts as 50 people. That's the way they do the math. Something like that. It's some configuration like that. So if we could just flood them with support and, this is a good thing. Here's the science. Just, there's science coming out of our ears. I mean, it's just asinine.
I think that's a great point. And so when it comes time to submit testimony, they're going to give more credence to people in the state, but that doesn't mean they're going to dismiss people from other states. You can, because then you can say, hey, I'm a falconer. I've been doing this for years. I think, one thing that's really important, somebody told me a long time ago, is our elected officials, they are supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people. So if you're elected official, and they can't know everything, obviously there's very few elected officials that are falconry experts or even have rudimentary knowledge about what it's about. If you go to them and you say, I'm your constituent, this is really important to me on a particular issue, be it falconry or the price of baked beans in the grocery store, and you are the only one they hear from, then chances are he or she is probably going to say, I need to vote this way. This is important to my constituents. And if they hear from 100 or 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000, you're right. Think of that's a lot of power. It's a lot of that's a lot of influence.
But I think Casey's got a point though. I guess the timing of it though is I wouldn't wait for testimony. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Casey. I think timing is everything. Timing's everything in life at times. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Casey. I think what Casey's trying to say is, you inundate them now with those emails and those phone calls, because the testimony, you at least get that momentum going. And if that's not what Casey meant, then it's certainly what I would suggest is you don't wait for. If
that's not what he meant.
You're already at the other end of it. Like now you're at the State House. I think that just as a suggestion, a strong one, is what I would suggest is that now's the time. And if you have outlets like Casey and Aaron, you have, especially after this podcast, you have that momentum and that voice. Now is the time where I don't care, even if it's just one legislator that I think Jim Platosh happened to mention, get it on the radar so that they're like, wait a minute, what's this? And then they're somewhat inundated with an email and or a phone call. You give me a number, I'll call. So at least my phone call's worth, what is it, 50, Casey? 50 people?
It was some equation like that where like if somebody calls and is like annoyed enough to call or is concerned enough or whatever the case may be, it counts as like 50, or it could have been 150 people.
There you go.
So if like
there's an algorithm,
if the phone is just ringing off the hook and there's just emails flying in and there's people emailing like studies and stuff and like, listen, this is no impact. This needs to change. You know, the greater falconry community is in support of this. My bird just flew into my mic.
I saw it.
It's
and then for the testimony, now you have all of that. You can literally download the best written emails and say, we have 350. Who knows the audience that you could reach by the time testimony comes. Now you have a plethora of emails and whatnot. Now you have a momentum behind you, not the other way around where up until you're building a case, and then when it's time for testimony, people come forward. I say timing's everything. I say that try and strategize so that you can take, the influence certainly that like Aaron and Casey have, starting with the podcast and then everything thereafter. But that's my.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Is to kind of lay the foundation now, create the awareness now, and then just build on that.
Yes, because it shows that you have presence. It's not, no offense, it's not 7 falconers from Connecticut. Now you have the falconry community behind you, and their readership is near and far. So it's not, now it becomes a cause. How's that? I mean, that's what a lot of other folk that have a cause do is you gain, it's a bit of a tidal wave. You have a momentum that is behind you, not you trying to afford a cause. It's you're there, but you have everybody behind you from the get-go.
Right? Aaron's very aware of that. He was instrumental in North Carolina. It took him a while to open up their LGBTQ rights, and Aaron was on the front lines of that, so he's very well aware of that. Right, Aaron? It worked great for you guys.
I got Aaron's strategy.
I got the bathrooms opened up to everyone down here.
Aaron's got they them bathrooms. It's great and it works, and it's true. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I think it's time to be a squeaky wheel. And NAFA's got 1,300 members, some measly amount of members. I think we get their impact and say, send an email out to all their members, sign this petition, send this email. I'll put it out. We'll get other falconers that are on social media that have large followings to get it out, and just get a bunch of random people that love falconry to just start bombarding them with calls and emails. And I mean, this could be, and then when the crazy, bird watcher, Audubon Society people show up, they're just like, dude, it's over before it even started.
How many Audubon members are there? Probably not.
Bro, who cares? Their whole thing, even in the name, is built on the back of dead birds.
That's my point, though. Is that falconers are, to Jim's point earlier, we're on our heels all the time. We're going into everything defeated with this defeated attitude and mindset. I think we need to go into this differently and approach it differently. And I'll say to you guys, and especially you gals out there, you may find yourself living in Connecticut one day. Forces could be out of your control. What if your company packed up and moved headquarters to Connecticut, and there you are, and suddenly you can't trap a red-tailed hawk there? So don't just think of it as their battle within the state of Connecticut. I think all falconers, especially in America, need to consider this their battle.
That well said, Aaron. And that is a great way to that's a great summation, because at this point they are the outlier. They're the only state that doesn't have a wild take. It really is. It's as a falconry community, it's something that we all should be concerned about, or at least try and throw our poker in the fire for these guys, because really it's as a whole. It's a fraternal order, and there's only, 4,000, maybe 5,000 falconers across the U.S. Like basically, we gotta as best we can, come together and help Connecticut. I mean, whether you're in Nevada or Alaska or California, if you haven't moved out of there yet, but
yeah, it could be your state next. Who knows? You have no idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's got to be, something's got to be, we have to start moving forward. Like Aaron said, Aaron's got some joke that's going around in his mind because he keeps smirking. And it was after Jim said something about put your poker in the fire, and Aaron started smiling. So I don't know what he was thinking about. I read his mind through the camera. I read his mind because I saw him start smirking and kind of looking away. But in all seriousness, it's true. And something's got to be done.
It's about all of us, I guess, is what I'm saying.
100%. Have we talked to the great Maynard about this? Because usually when you
James, he did give us he gave us quite a while ago. He said, what we were doing in the past, we were trying to work from the bottom up, dealing with people that were sort of like a lower level wildlife biologist, and you need to apply top down pressure. So because if you're, let's face it, if you go to the administrative assistant in a company and you say, I need to do this, well, they're probably going to say, yeah, sure, and then that's going to be as far as it's going to go. But if you somehow get your way to a VP or a president, then it's like, whoa, I want this to happen, and then the pressure is downward, and things tend to happen.
Yeah, James is all about going for the throat.
Yeah.
He's all about that.
Which I think
I've seen James in action. That guy, he'll
he knows his stuff.
He'll get you out of your house. I mean, I got nipped by a little dog. $25,000 later, James got me.
Wow.
Just because the homeowner didn't want to produce the rabies certificate. Like, I wasn't going to sue the guy or anything. And, I'm just like, James, like, what do I do? This guy won't show me the rabies certificate. Like, what do I do? He's like, oh, don't worry about it. And he just like freaking went in there like a samurai and like literally like chopped their heads off. And
that was only after you were foaming at the mouth, though.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I was chasing my family around, just like hallucinating, climbing on the walls, But yeah, no, James, when you sick him on something, he'll get it done. But it's a lot of effort. And like Jim was alluding to on our, we had like a little conference call. It's kind of like it has to start. We want to go for the throat, but it also, from the state's perspective, it starts with the falconers that live there having to, all right, let's get this thing going. Let's get the fire going, and let's pour freaking gasoline on it and just blow it up and get this thing passed so that you guys are not living in a draconian hellscape of a state.
That's a quote right there, man.
John, would you provide us with something that we could put out to share with people, a list of contacts that they could reach out to write respectful letters?
Yeah. I can.
The falconry community.
I think the people, really, some of the people that are the most important were people on the Connecticut General Assembly's Environmental Committee, because they're going to be the ones that are going to have to get this. That's the first sort of stop on the train, is they need to get it out of committee. I think certainly some of the people in the Wildlife Bureau and the commissioner of the DEEP, they tend to be supportive, but they still need to hear from the fact that this is an important issue, not just to the 20 odd some people in Connecticut, but it's important to sportsmen and women across the United States.
Right.
So I can certainly provide you some contacts. I think that's a great way to start. You guys have raised a really good point, which is, don't wait for the train to pull into the station. Start talking about this before you even get on board the train.
And I really want to especially encourage people out there that are listening that might be the president of their falconry organization. To Casey's point earlier, if a phone call is worth 50 phone calls, one phone call is worth 50, or whatever we said, theirs might be worth more with their expertise and their credentials.
Could be. People. All it takes is to get the right person to listen to you sometimes, and then the next thing you know, really reach the right person. Like Jim said, timing is everything. How many
when
times?
It comes to law, precedence matters, and it's like, there's 48 other states with.
Yeah, the science is there. The science is behind us.
I was going to say too is even if it's not someone that is sympathetic to say falconry and falconers, what it could be is they're sympathetic to like the cause, if you will. Like, wait, you're telling me all of the other 48 states they're all out. Like once you kind of explain a little bit, like we're the only state that doesn't allow falconers to like. It could even be that slant, if you will. In other words, the ridiculousness of what you guys aren't allowed, what falconers aren't allowed. You see what I'm saying? Like every once in a while, you could get a legislator or a senator that's kind of like, well, you're actually infringing on the rights of a falconer if you want to push the envelope that far. But I guess what I'm saying is, sometimes it's just a sympathetic ear as well. It's just the illogic basis behind what you guys aren't allowed as falconers down there. It's like comes to a point like, wait a minute, what kind of country or state were we living in?
Yeah. Well, another angle is like, I don't know how much weight falconry coordinators have with the state. Not much, right?
Not much. Our falconry coordinator, Lori Fortman, she's been great. She's been supportive. She's really learned. She's educated herself a lot. She goes out of her way to try to help us in terms of banning our birds upon release or before release. So she's good. I think sometimes she's stuck between a rock and a hard place because she has to answer to the bureau chief and then the head of the wildlife division. So to answer your question, probably not a lot of influence. I don't want to dismiss her contributions because they're significant, but it's not the person that's going to be the decision maker.
Okay. I was more or less asking that for not in the state, but the surrounding states having the falconry coordinators that we have good relationships with, like Karen up in Maine. She's the best. The people in Jersey are awesome. If we had them maybe make calls like, listen, this is a problem. We have no problems with it in our state. Everything functions.
I think it would go a long way.
You know what I mean? I don't know if it's worth going that angle. I think we should just start attacking it from different angles. I think we should do a pre-written letter that people can take because nobody wants to work. You know what I mean? Like speaking of Connecticut, I follow this guy, Sean Reyes. He's like a First Amendment auditor. And this like Connecticut state trooper was like smacking him, spit in his face and like all this stuff. And they actually arrested Sean Reyes instead of the officer that like spit in his face for no reason. And he put out this petition and like 10,000 people signed it. That guy got fired. He got money and like this whole thing like changed because of the support he got because there was video evidence and all this stuff. And that was in Connecticut. So like something as simple as that, like just getting, something, I mean, it's obviously completely different, but it does seem like if you can get enough support from like the general public, like, come on, this is crazy. But the way he did it is because nobody wants to work. Even if you are, outraged by what you're hearing or seeing, nobody's going to go. Not most people are not going to go and draft a whole letter, put it in the mail it. Most people just want to like, can I click 3 buttons and it sends? Great, I'll do it. Like that's what he had on his YouTube video, and it literally popped up on the bottom like support Sean with this petition. I clicked on it and it was like sign here, put your name, send, and then it was like number 10,100 added to the list. And like, so something like that, if we could do something like that, where we put something together that like can go further, where it's less effort for people. Cause falconers we're very emotional and very passionate people, but we're not very generous people for the most part. You know what I mean? Ask any bird of prey breeder or any equipment maker. Falconers are, they don't like parting with their money or their time. And that's nothing wrong with that. So I think we need to make it as easy for them as possible. After this episode airs, me and I are going to do a little research. We're going to try to find names of people that can be emailed, phone calls that can be made. And then we're going to try to do some sort of like attack strategy where we can put it together so that everybody can start helping. And then we're going to send it out to clubs throughout the country so that they can get their members to jump on. Hopefully NAFA helps out if they're not too busy worrying about memes on Facebook or whatever. Just kidding, NAFA. But that's because something's got to be done about it. And we got to help.
No, he's right.
Rant over.
No, Casey's spot on because that's what they did for the Peregrine take.
Yeah.
Like when the Peregrine take first came, I signed a letter that was pre-generated on behalf of like Maine. It had nothing to do with Rhode Island, but I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've been supporting falconry regulations that would have no impact in Connecticut for years. And other things issues that were near and dear to the hearts of the DEP, land acquisitions and things like that. So that's fine because I figured, what's the saying? A rising tide lifts all boats. It's really important. I can't tell you how much this is going to help because it's been really important to get the message out there. And if we start flooding the zone with a lot of information, it's going to help because I think there is a lack of awareness. I think by and large, the hunting and fishing community does tend to be a little apathetic. They don't need. We'll be the first ones to complain about having bad regulations, but when it comes time to actually writing a letter or making a phone call, they're like, let somebody else do it. Well, we can't do that. We in Connecticut, we have to take the lead on this. You guys can help. Everybody can help, but we have to drive this bus.
Now, Casey's on to something.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It has to be like a strategic attack plan towards this issue, and we have to just like really follow through with it and get it done. And then like once we got them on the ropes, then we like our cavalry is like freaking Maynard comes in there just freaking slicing like that guy from freaking The Patriot. Fire the house and bonds. You know that guy? This is freaking the evil guy. That's like James, bro. He goes in there and just starts chopping people up. That's what we need.
One of the things when I first became a falconer, one of the unique, strange things in Connecticut is you have to get permission from your zoning board to keep a bird of prey on your property. And, of course, I lived in West Hartford at the time, which is sort of an uptight community. And, of course, there was no precedent. So they said, well, wait a minute, you want to do what? And they had no idea what it was about. So I talked to some falconers in other states, a falconer from Oklahoma, and he was great. He provided me with some advice. I crafted a fact sheet. So I think having a fact sheet included with that is like, hey, did you know this is falconers in 48 states can do this, and they have done it safely for decades. This is not unprecedented. We're not asking for something that's that unusual.
Yeah, something like that. Again, with this, there's going to be endless studies out there that talk about the mortality rate of first-year birds.
Right.
So let us know how we can help, John.
I appreciate it. Can't tell you how much
Sporting Chance is behind you guys.
Yeah, I will put together some information, and I'll put together some contacts, and I think we might be able to just generate a tidal wave, as the way Jim put it. You never know.
And for everyone in Connecticut, I really hope you're getting involved in this because you've got a good opportunity to make your state more friendly to your sport.
Well said.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, and obviously, I'm using quotation marks, follow all the rules and regulations of your town that you live in. But pro tip, just if you have to get a permit to build something, just say I'm building a shed. I'm building an 8x8 shed. Thanks. Do you have to come? You have to come inspect it? Okay, come inspect it. Great. What's going in it? My lawnmower. That's it. My tools. There you go. You're not lying.
My squirrel killer.
My squirrel killing tool.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I did. Listen, I lived in a prissy town, Oradell, New Jersey, and they didn't want anything to do with it. And we just pulled a permit to build a shed. And, all the cops knew I had the bird eventually, but nobody, it didn't become anything. But yeah, I'm not going to, because there's some towns where like, if you ask them, then they're like, oh no. And then you have to there was a guy in California that had to get a lawyer, and it cost him like 10 grand to go after the state, the town with lawyers and all this stuff to get it passed, because he said I'm having a bird in it. They're like, no fowl, no any type of game bird or anything like that. They're like, no, it's not that. And then it was this back and forth thing to the point where he just had to get a lawyer. And then they finally let him have it, but it was a huge problem.
Yeah. And, our club president, actually, he lives in a historic district in a town in the western part of the state. He actually had to go for a variance. It cost him several $1,000s to do that. Now, unbeknownst to me, they had sent letters to all my neighbors within a certain radius, and it's saying, "Hey, are you okay with this?" Because I really had to say what I was doing because they wouldn't. I had to present this letter saying it was okay for my zoning board in order to get my falconry permit, which is another one of the weird things.
Oh, that's draconian. We got to get that. We got to add that to the list of things that are going to get changed. We got to get that changed. That and the written permission on private property. We got to get rid of that too.
Well,
it's just verbal permission.
Yeah,
it's like that reminds me of the recent USDA laws that they were trying to get through that were going to impact falconers.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. We're already federally regulated.
Right.
So
yeah, that was another thing in Connecticut. I don't know if you guys remember about, I don't know, 20 years ago, this woman was keeping a chimpanzee called Travis, and she used to give this thing lobster and what's the Xanax. So this chimpanzee,
and he had it made, dude.
It ripped. Her friend came over. It was going nuts. Her friend came over and it attacked this woman, and this woman lost her eyesight, and it is basically very much dependent on other people to care for her now. So they passed this law about exotic and dangerous animals. So we had to go to the hearing and say, "Hey, we're already regulated. You don't need to regulate on top of regulations." So and those are the kinds of things where you need to be aware of this stuff. You have to be ever vigilant, because just because you have good regulations doesn't mean somebody can't come in and get a wild idea and say, "Hey, let's change this." Because
but see, the premise behind that, though, that's a bit nefarious. It's like you can't counter all that kind of crap, and that's why, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, it's like in the end, Frederick the Great. The sport's been around, not even the sport, but the sport practice 4,000 years. In the end, it doesn't need to be a justification for it. And honestly, when it comes to a chamber, I'm okay. What I've done is I just build it. I look at it the other way. I was like, all right, well then after the fact, what are you going to get me for? A $500 fine? It beats a $10,000 lawyer to represent me. So basically, falconers, as it's in our nature. There was a profile done. The feds did a study. I have it, and I'll have to share it with you guys. Certainly Aaron and Casey they did a profile on falconers, and basically we are of a rebellious nature. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. Because that's, you need to be that way. That's my middle name,
Rebellion.
Yeah. A bit of a maverick. What's wrong with that? It means you're just independently minded and you're doing things that you don't necessarily adhere to.
It means you're American, Jim. That's what you're trying to say. It just means you're an American. You're a good American. Yeah. Skeptical of authority, free thinker. Do what you want to do. Yeah. Don't infringe on anything that I'm doing. That's what I'm talking about.
It's like me and my people. I'm like, I'm going to use whatever bathroom I want to use.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. And that's what Aaron's, he pushed for it, man. He got it. And we're happy for Aaron down there.
That's good.
But no, I think the strategy, though, is when you guys put it all together, Casey, Aaron, they've got some great, strategies and advice there, John, in the sense of, and I think the letter is a great idea. Put something together where it's I don't want to see, I am of a well, John's kind of an older guy too, so am I. Like a GoFundMe, I'm not used to those things, but basically that kind of mentality where it's like, hey, help these guys in Connecticut. I'm not saying money-wise. I'm saying you generate a letter, and you essentially sign to it, and you say, hey, listen, we're behind these guys. And you could think about it, John. You technically could send it to the director of the DEP, right? I mean, you could say, once you have access to an email like that, I mean, it's not, what are they going to do? Slap you on the wrist and say, yeah, you can't have a wild take? Well, guess what? You guys don't have that anyway.
No, I don't think, I mean, there's really nothing that we're risking here, because when you start from a negative, there's really nowhere to go but to a positive. I think it is important. mean, I do a lot with social media. I know a lot of people don't use, many people under the age of 40 don't use Facebook anymore, but some people do, including, and people do pay attention to, I think some elected officials go on there just to kind of take the pulse of what's going on in their communities. That's really important to people who get elected. Some people just want to keep getting elected, but some people actually care about what the people in their towns think. And if a lot of people say, "Hey, this is important to me," even if it's people who don't really know what falconry is, but they can get behind it just because it's like, "Hey, I don't like the fact that you're telling a private citizen that they can't do something."
Do something that is technically legal. Think about it. It's contradiction. It's the inverse of what you're allowed. Like, you have the right to practice falconry,
right?
And yet you can't in its fullest term or way. That's the insult. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right, Casey, Aaron. Right?
No, 100%. We don't live in Europe. We don't have to buy birds, and you shouldn't have to rely on an out of state take where you have to spend all this extra money to practice a sport that you're legally allowed to practice, especially with all the science that backs up the entire thing. So I think this is a no brainer. I think the only thing that could get in our way is like some other third party, bird watching groups or anything like that. But I think that the whole tide, just from what I see on social media, I think that people are a lot more open to the idea of falconry once it's explained to them. And I think it's less like it may have been, many years ago when you guys first tried going after this. I think now a lot of people are, Jones Falconry has 1.9 million subscribers on YouTube with hundreds and hundreds of millions of views of him catching stuff with a kestrel. You're talking about millions of people that have seen falconry in its simplest, most rudimentary, pathetic form. Car hawking. Just kidding. Sorry, Jones Falconry. Just kidding.
The truth leaked out for a second.
But you know what I mean? But it's just, I think that the general public is more open to the idea of it, especially when you just explain the simple science in like a 30-second little pitch. It's like, that makes sense. 70% of them die. You're allowed to have one in its first year only, and you can release it later. Oh, that's pretty cool. It's like really.
But you know what? Again, not to get we can't get away from the focal point. The focal point is 48 other states allow a wild take. Connecticut allows falconry. You're not asking for anything outside the boundaries of what falconry is defined and what we are allowed to do in 48 other states. When you really kind of stay focused on the logic behind it and the legality of it, that's what I mean. Like, you almost push away all that other bullshit. Like, whether it's Audubon, whether it's bird banders. Basically, let me put it, in a more poignant way, is like, who gives a shit what they think? Because if they've already been in the way, so we already know that they've been in the way, and they've created an obstacle for John and the falconers of Connecticut. I look at it the other way, as like, hey, game on now. Like, I'm tired of you dictating what I'm legally allowed to do. You're getting in the way of something that by the very nature of the sport and by the definition of it and what it's allowed in 48 other states, you're not allowing us to do now, and as far as the biology and all that other stuff, that's kind of, it's not rhetorical, but, we're just kind of, repeating what we already know. Really what it's about, I think, is just the fact that they're not allowed to do pull a resource that every other state's allowed to do with their falconry regs. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
and the resistance.
Those bird bandits and Audubon, like, you're irrelevant at this point. Like, so what? Get in the way, but in the end, you're getting, like, don't be intimidated by it, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, enough of that, because again, it's a curse, but at the same sense, it could be a plus. Is Connecticut doesn't have anything as it is anyway, so why not say, hey, fine, testify. But then we got 48 other states and 48 other clubs that are testifying on our behalf, right?
Exactly, and any general public people that enjoy falconry and respect it and think it's a cool thing and a great aspect of conservation. Because you never know, we might get 4,000 falconers in the states to support it, and then you get another 4,000 of just random people that are like, dude, I love I think this is cool. I'm not going to do it, but I think it's awesome. And they start signing it. You know what I mean? And then,
or just the cause, like we were saying earlier, it's just the cause of. It's not even the falconry facet or aspect of it. It's the fact that falconers or citizens like John and the other falconers who are citizens aren't able to practice the sport that they are entitled to practice, right? So you could be a non-falconer and be like, wait a minute, this is bullshit. You know why? Why can't John DiArpino trap a red tail again to stay focused?
Yeah,
48 other states allow.
You never know where the support's going to come from. I think there's a trend that in recent years, ever since COVID, is people want to know. They like to grow their own food. They like to know where their food's coming from. Younger people have gotten into hunting for different reasons than perhaps our collective group did, because we grew up with it and we liked spending time. They get into it because, like, hey, I would rather shoot a deer and know that the venison, where it's coming from. So you never know where this level of support, even non-hunters maybe say, hey, just for the reasons that Jim has just cited, just for more like, almost like, you're not like the freedom to do what you want. Because my motto is, hey, live and let live. If you want to do something, I don't particularly like opera, but I don't stand outside the Bushnell Hall in Connecticut and say, don't go in there because I don't like opera. But no, like, hey, do what you want, because it's not really impacting people. Very few people. I can tell you, I can count on one hand, and I don't think I've ever been stopped by a conservation officer in the woods. If I've been stopped by a police officer, they usually say, hey, what are you doing? And then they're fascinated by it and they want to hang around and watch. So I've had very few people say, I don't like what you're doing.
Right.
I think you guys need to solicit the support of other sporting organizations as well.
Which we do. I've been on the Connecticut Conservation Advisory Council for longer than I've been a falconer. So we're talking about almost 30 years going to these meetings. We do have the support of these organizations: the Rough Grouse Society, the fishermen, the deer hunters, the anglers. They've been very supportive, and it's not insignificant, because some of these groups have a lot larger numbers than we do. So that's an excellent suggestion, but we need to go even beyond, because that Conservation Advisory Council is not comprehensive of the sporting groups. And a lot of people, let's face it, a lot of people don't join organizations and clubs because, as Casey said, people that hunt and fish, sometimes they tend to be individualists and they don't like to join organizations, but they will say, hey, wait a minute here. I think this is not right.
Well, I think that's just it, though. You just hit it, and that's what I was going to say. Is what I don't think any of us can get away from is the cause. You can be an angler, you can be a deer hunter, you can be a turkey. It doesn't. In the end, it's like, well, wait a minute. I've got another group of guys that are doing that. They're hunting. They're hunting with the bird of prey. Our cause becomes their cause, because in a ancillary or a peripheral way, we all kind of come together for something like that. You see what I'm saying? So that's what we're saying even earlier, is like the non-hunter that still is about just a citizen's right to be able to fly their bird or trap their bird. It's the cause, in a general sense. And that's, it though. I mean, you have connections with some of those clubs in Connecticut there. I don't.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point. And I think it does come down to, it's almost, it's not a constitutional right or anything like that, but it comes, one of the reasons they got Sunday hunting through is because it was basically like a property rights thing. Like, if I own land and I want to hunt on private land or somebody else's private land with their permission, then why should the state say you can't do that? It's ironic, because in the Bible Belt, because a lot of these laws in Connecticut were blue laws, which were puritanical, based on religious. You don't hunt on the Sabbath. So, but it's in the South, where there's a lot more religion is a lot more part of everyday life. They've had Sunday hunting for decades.
That's what Aaron said earlier.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Any closing thoughts? I don't want to leave any stone unturned, but
I would just say that I'm really grateful for the opportunity to reach a wider audience in this. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys reaching out and providing this opportunity, because this is important. It's not just important for me, but the next generation of falconers. I'm still cautiously optimistic. I admit, and, in the last few years, I kind of got beaten down by just because I've been going to meetings and testifying and doing this a long time. And after a while, there's a sense that you're sort of swimming against the tide. But if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. So why not give it the best shot? There's no guarantees, but one thing is a guarantee: if we don't do anything, nothing's going to change. That's a guarantee.
Yeah, I think it's a national issue amongst falconers. All falconers listening should support you guys in however you guys as Connecticut falconers see fit. Well, thank you all for coming on. Jim, I appreciate you as Northeast Director supporting one of your states and putting the power of NAFA behind their efforts in Connecticut.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, and this is, to be, a straightforward kind of guy is, NAFA's important, but no, man, I mean, the bottom line is it's got to come from John and the Falconers of Connecticut. And just like that momentum, we can come behind these guys and support them, but it's up to John and those guys to really to make it happen. And we're here, John, as you know. I mean, we're all here for you. But all that being said, is even on a personal level, I'm here on behalf of myself and as a falconer, as a Rhode Island falconer, but just as a falconer in general. I'm here for John and the guys in Connecticut, because it's ludicrous that they cannot trap a passage redtail. Passage meaning it's passing through. It's technically for the time frame. Yeah, it's a Connecticut bird, but as John alluded to way back when, it could have come from Maine. It could have come from Canada. It could have come from, obviously, maybe even Rhode Island. The bottom line is it's a ludicrous, what they're dealing with is just, it's just, again, I'll repeat it's just ludicrous. It's not fair. And I know life's not fair, but man, on behalf of just myself and I hope falconers out there really, take a personal interest in it and just realize that falconry as a whole, Connecticut needs that support and that help. And oh man, look at that owl. And that, that's that. Yeah. Obviously, whatever I can do, and certainly in the capacity as a falconer and a Rhode Island falconer, but certainly as a Northeast Director, as NAFA. What I will say is there's a lot of, the things that I did in Rhode Island, I certainly had NAFA's backing, but I'm telling you, the intestinal fortitude and the initial, thrust of it came from me, and then it came from other falconers as well, in the years to come. But what I'm getting at is, it wasn't NAFA tapping on my shoulder saying, hey, you only have a passage redtail take. You want more? It was like, no, I want more. And it was Daryl Perkins and some other guys that testified on my behalf. But,
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think, we had a lot of support initially to get the bill passed and the regulations implemented. But Bob Crook, who's has since passed, he was a lobbyist for the sportsmen and women in the state, and he said he loved to tell the story how half a dozen falconers went up to the state house and got falconry legalized, and it's true. We did. We went to a lot of meetings. We did a lot of legwork. We talked to a lot of people, and it was. Trust me, they did not want to have falconry in this state, but we did it. But I think now's the time to sort of pick this torch up again and say, let's make this better. Let's make this like every other state practices falconry. We're not asking for anything crazy here. Like you guys have said, I'll reiterate it. We're asking for something that's safely practiced in 48 other states in the union. And so there's already a precedent here. We're not asking for anything that unusual.
Yeah, well said. That's a very good way to wrap it up. And listeners, we're going to get, like I said, we're going to get some stuff out so that everybody can get involved and we can push this thing through. We're going to get the Connecticut guys fired up. We got to give them some backup, some air support, and we're going to get this thing done. So I appreciate both you guys coming on and giving your time.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Nice. Good seeing you, Casey and
Good seeing
Darren.
you guys always.